Right guys, welcome to Lean Lifestyle. My name's Ricky Brody and this is part 2 of how to design the perfect program. Today is nutrition. So like I mentioned in the previous video, I feel like this is important for people to understand which concept does what so that you can get a good idea of what you're trying to get from each component, and this is going to allow you to manipulate them a lot easier. Nutrition's main focus is for you to fuel your body. That's for training performance, daily energy levels, manage your hunger, and then the calorie deficit. The problem is a lot of people just focus on the calorie deficit side of things. And what this often leads to is people massively under-eating just for the sake of achieving a calorie deficit. And that's not actually that necessary. Most people can eat a lot more than what they think, and this is something I see quite a lot within clients where they often say that they can't believe how much food they're eating while still losing weight. Or another thing here is, I've not eaten this much food in my life. So you want to make sure that you're eating enough food so that you can train effectively, your mood's in a good place most days, you're not feeling hungry all the time, and then you're also creating a calorie deficit. Don't just focus on the calorie deficit. I cannot explain this enough. Well, I'm going to explain it in this video, but you know what I mean. Once you can get your head around this, not only will you have a much more enjoyable journey, but you'll also start to achieve a leaner, stronger, athletic looking physique. First off, I want to talk about maximising performance. The role in nutrition and your performance, they're so closely correlated, it's unbelievable. A lot of people go through this phase of under eating and they may be able to train really hard and they go, train 5 times a week, do loads of cardio, but it only lasts a few weeks. A lot of this comes down to the variables that I spoke about within the training, but also the fact that they're not correctly fueling themselves. Obviously, if you're able to fuel yourself correctly within your training and you can train consistently, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to build more muscle while sustaining a calorie deficit. Now, if you're under eating, you'll find that your performance starts to drop, you feel a bit flat and depleted, and you don't really want to do that much. This often leads to people not training or not doing their cardio and struggling to maintain that calorie deficit. So maximizing your performance means that you're going to be in a position where not only are you able to train well, but you're most likely going to be able to progress within your training and build more muscle. Now, your daily energy levels play a huge role in your progress. Cannot stress enough about this, because there is nothing worse than feeling tired every single day and having the expectation to train, have the willpower to work around things, like in the sense of, like if someone offers you certain foods at work or something. If you're feeling tired, lethargic, fairly moody, these things are quite easy to go steer towards them and actually put you into a calorie surplus potentially. Not only that, but even when you achieve your goals, it can be quite likely that you can't see the progress that you're making and you're struggling mentally because you're not fueling your day correctly. When you're in a good mood, it's really obvious when you're seeing progress, and I see this a lot with people that I've coached through doing photo shoots and competitions, that as we get closer, obviously it's been a long 16 to 20 weeks maybe, the deficits are a little bit harsher, progress has been made, they look incredible, but in that moment they're still questioning things. But yet 2, 3, 4 weeks after, once they're starting to come up to maintenance calories, they then look back at the pictures and they're like, oh my god, I can't believe I look that way. And I've experienced this myself, but I'm fully aware of it now, so I don't quite get caught up in it. But this is why I'm putting it out, because if you can be aware of that, it can help you manage your journey a lot better. You start to see the progress and not feel so tired and moody, which means that you're going to be more aware and more positive. There's obviously a time and a place for pushing and getting yourself into that position, but for most people, that should be a lot later down the line. If you can start your journey on 2,200 calories while still dropping body fat, there's no need for you to be eating 1,700 calories and feeling lethargic whilst getting the same fat loss. Less calories doesn't always mean more fat loss. Managing your hunger is obviously a big part of going through a fat loss journey. There's going to be phases that you feel quite hungry and you can get quite frustrated with it because it can become quite regular. A lot of this is determined by a few variables, but one of them, because we're speaking about today, is nutrition. If you're not eating enough food, you are going to start to feel hungry on a regular basis. When you're in a calorie deficit, you can start to see patterns emerge within your hunger, in the sense of certain times that you eat frequently. Like if you're consistent with your eating patterns, you will start to see that you get a bit hungry just before you eat and things like that, which is absolutely fine. But the problem is, if you're in a deeper calorie deficit when you don't need to be, you start to see this happening on a more regular basis, meaning that you could potentially find yourself hungry 3, 4, 5 times a day, 6, 7 times a week, rather than once a day, 3 times a week. So managing your calories can be very important, because when you're eating enough food, you do find yourself hungry on a less regular basis, and this is obviously really important when it comes to a successful fat loss journey. Managing your hunger is probably one of the biggest issues people come across. And then obviously the fact that if you are under eating, you're probably going to be tired and lethargic, this is also going to impact your willpower. So you're going to be tired, lethargic, more hungry, and then people are going to be offering you food. Or you might have stuff at home, whatever you do. But at the end of the day, what this means is that it's going to be very difficult to stay consistent. And people often go through this phase of staying extremely consistent for a week or two, and then on the weekend overeat because they can't control their hunger, and they go through this vicious cycle. Very difficult when you get to that point. There's nothing wrong with eating off planned meals, there's nothing wrong with enjoying balance, but you have to make sure that you get straight back at it. But it's very difficult to do this when you're on such a low calorie diet after you've just eaten 3,500 calories to then refer back to 1,500 calories. One of the other variables I see with managing hunger is that people who are eating enough food tend to be able to push through that hunger phase a lot easier because it doesn't last as long. And that's very helpful because at the end of the day, if you've got that control and that confidence, you can just drink some water, have a black coffee or diet drink or whatever, and then hunger tends to sort of make its way off. Whereas if you're in a very low calorie deficit, it's quite difficult to actually manage that hunger consistently. Even when you eat, a lot of people tend to still feel hungry after, and that's where a lot of the overeating things can come into play. And now obviously the calorie deficit, the holy grail of fat loss. The most important factor is of course a calorie deficit when it comes to fat loss, but you need to understand that the other variables play a huge role in this as well, because it's very difficult to maintain a calorie deficit if they're not in place. If your training's not going very well, if you're feeling tired and lethargic, if your mood's affected and you can't actually get through the day without thinking to yourself, I can't wait to eat my next meal, it's really difficult to continue to create a calorie deficit. And we all know it's a lot easier to eat 300 calories than what it is to burn 300 calories. So if you are in this calorie deficit and then you tend to overeat and you end up overeating by an extra 800 calories or whatever, it's going to be very difficult to burn this off. So what you want to do is you want to get yourself in a place where you're balancing your calorie output to your calorie deficit. So as long as there is a calorie deficit created, most people, the number's 500. Let's just say, for example, you're eating 2,000 calories and you burn 2,500 calories. There's your 2,000 calories, 2,500 calories. We're still in a 500 calorie deficit. Now, if we go down to 1,500 calories that we're eating and then 2,000 calorie output, we're still in a 500 calorie deficit. But at 1,500 calories, it's very difficult to train hard. It's very difficult to manage your moods and all these other variables that I've mentioned that are really important for a successful fat loss journey. So if your current diet isn't providing you with enough fuel, you're going to struggle. Now, obviously, like I just mentioned, you're still going to be burning 500 calories more, but this is a lot more achievable when you're feeling good, your energy's up there, you're going to be moving more naturally throughout the day, your NEAT plays a big role in your calorie output, like a very big part in it, compared to your cardio or your training. So my view is if you eat more and you're able to move more, then as long as you're creating a calorie deficit, you're going to be in a better place. You're also going to find your mood, energy, all that sort of stuff is in a much better place, which is going to lead to a much more enjoyable journey, and you're more likely to actually maintain your results. And then obviously we come to the type of food you actually consume rather than just the calorie side of things. It's really important to understand that the food you eat does matter. You need to take this into consideration. I'm not saying you need to go completely clean and not eat anything that's enjoyable. Personally, I have like an 80-20 approach where I eat 80% of my calories, which are mostly whole foods, nutritionally dense and good for me, make me feel good. And then there's that 20% where I can kind of play around with a bit of chocolate, crisp, whatever. And what this means is, say for example, your calories are 2,000 calories, you're going to be getting about 1,600 calories from good whole foods. Now 1,600 calories from good whole foods, if you select the right foods, is actually a lot of food. 250 grams of potato is like 200 and something calories, and that's a lot of volume. So as you can imagine, you can fit a lot of food into 1,600 calories while still enjoying the rest. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to. Like, I do actually eat a lot of good food 90% of the time. 100% of my food comes from whole foods. But it's just an option and something to consider, that if you are going through this phase and you do have a sweet tooth and you do want to have a bit more balance, it is an option. And because you're consistently doing it, you do tend to find that you don't fall off the wagon. Like, just as an example, I've experienced it where when I'm 100% on it all the time, constantly eating whole foods, when I do start to eat something like chocolate, I just can't stop. And this is a variable that I've learned to control due to the fact that when I'm eating, I do allow myself to consume these sort of things now and then. So eating whole foods is obviously going to benefit you from an energy perspective, but also tracking your nutrition can give you a bit of an idea of what foods do what. So if you start to find yourself getting lethargic at certain times, you can look over your nutrition and see what's working. If you're consuming enough calories whilst in a calorie deficit, then it could be the foods themselves. Personally, I've found recently recently that something like oats first thing in the morning really leaves me lethargic. If I go down to like 30-40 grams, it's not so bad, but for me the volume there is just not enjoyable. I'm used to eating big bowls of oats that are like 80 to 100 grams, and that just doesn't work for me anymore. A few years ago I used to feel energized and great for it, but now not so much. I actually prefer a high protein, high fat breakfast and then distribute my carbs throughout the rest of the day. Another thing as well is like bread. Personally, I don't work very well with bread. It's not to say I never have it, but I'm fully aware that if I eat a lot of bread, I do start to feel tired and lethargic, whether that's the carbs or what. But usually if I eat a lot of potato or couscous or even rice, I don't necessarily have the same experience. So for me, it's more down to the foods themselves. And when you take that into consideration and learn and understand what your nutrition is there for, you can start to pick at these little things, and it gives you more focus towards it rather than just focusing on a calorie deficit all the time. So just as a roundup, make sure that you're eating enough to consistently train well, have good daily energy, have a good mood, and then of course create a holy grail of fat loss, a calorie deficit. Once you get your head around this and not just focusing on eating as little as possible, you'll find you have a much more enjoyable journey, but also you'll find that your body will look a lot better for it as well. I've worked with so many guys that have worked through diets that have starved themselves, and yeah, they've got themselves lean, but they don't have the muscle fullness, they don't feel comfortable. Whereas when they started working with me and we got closer to their goals, they always seem to say, I've never looked this good, I've never felt this good at the same time. And that's because their muscles are full, they're having good sessions, their energy is good, and they're able to actually see the progress that they're getting rather than feeling very tired and negative and not get that positive feedback that they should be getting from their training and journey. But like I say, this will also give you an insight to the role that nutrition plays within your life. It's not just about fat loss, it's about understanding what food can do for you. You know, personally, I like to optimize my days as much as possible. I will do more videos on this sort of stuff. So I am very, very on top of what I'm eating because I want to have an energized, positive, feeling good day. If I don't eat the right food and I don't stay consistent with it, or I don't eat enough food, I tend to find my energy levels drop, my mood drops. I'm not as productive, I don't want to do as much, I certainly don't want to train or do cardio. Whereas when I control these variables, I eat the right type of food for me, I eat consistently, I'm getting enough calories, I feel energized, my training's going well, I want to train, I want to do things, I want to be productive, I want to talk to people, I want to work, like everything just is a lot smoother compared to when I'm in a calorie deficit. And I know this because whenever I'm doing a photo shoot or anything like that, when it gets towards the end, no one wants to be around me. But I hope this helps. If you have any questions or anything, drop a comment below, like the video, subscribe. I'm going to be putting out a lot more stuff about this because I've been working with a lot of people over the last 5 years, and I've learned a lot about this stuff, not just for me but for others. And when clients get the concept of what their nutrition is in place for rather than just focusing on a calorie deficit, they tend to enjoy it a lot more and they educate themselves a lot better because they don't just focus on that one thing of a calorie deficit. They understand the other variables, and this is a huge part of it. Hope this helps. Take care.